pissed because there's no consistency, not from us, but from, can't even say it because you get laps. It's stupid. Man, great job, you guys. Really proud of you all.
And what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. I'm your host, Alex Daniels. We've got quite a bit of race recap this week. We kicked off the Formula One season. We had NASCAR in Vegas. We had a bunch of other stuff going on at IMSA, 12 Hours of Sebring, High Limit Sprints in Las Vegas, World of Outlaws, the Cowtown Classic at Kennedale. So let's kick it off. Formula One Australian Grand Prix, first race of the 2025 season. A lot of speculation going into what the season will bring after seeing some, pre-season testing and whatnot that we talked about on our other episodes. But going into qualifying, we had Q1, and I'm willing to bet that Red Bull was really wondering if they made a mistake by not putting Yuki in one of the main cars, as Liam Lawson ends up not making it to Q2, and he's only better than two broken Haas cars. So not a great start for Lawson as far as that goes. Yuki takes that Red Bull Racing team, Visa Cash App, whatever the hell that team is. I don't know. I can't keep track of it. But takes the the sister Red Bull car, the lower level car, to fifth in Q1. Going into Q3, Russell was really strong for Mercedes, but Verstappen ended up knocking him out of the top spot by 0.02 of a second. This held for a few minutes, but then the two McLarens came in strong, just as we thought they would and expected. And Norris takes the pole, Piastri in second to start the Grand Prix off. So going into the race, we knew we were going to see some weather. There was a whole bunch of stuff going on there. Starting race out, rain, standing water, led us right to the formation lap chaos. Rookie Red Bull driver Hajar ends up spinning out and delaying the start, ruining his race. It would ultimately ruin his race. Post-race, we saw he was very upset. A lot of stuff going there. A lot of emotion goes into this. But yeah, he had a rough opening day in Formula One. First few corners didn't go so well for Jack Doohan either. He finds the wall in lap one. Didn't take long. We had another one. Saints found the wall during a safety car on lap two. Just chaos right out of the gate. Lap 34 ends up being the next big one where Alonso made contact with the wall there. Lap 44, Piastri makes a huge mistake going into the grass, giving Max the right position to take control, take second place, stays out on slick tires while Lando takes the leading McLaren into the box to change to the interim tires. Lawson ends up putting his Red Bull in the wall also during lap 47. Just one thing after another with this race. It was f***ing wild. For Formula One, it was pretty exciting to watch. Keep up on strategy. Hamilton and Leclerc come in for wet tires on lap 48 during a safety car from Lawson's incident. This sets up a great battle for the remainder of the race. Final 9 laps for Lando and Max battling back and forth, just looking. They're pushing the limits on these, intermediate tires with a lot of water on the track still. Water was off and on, rain off and on. Max couldn't close the gap though, and Lando Norris ends up getting the race win. Race 1 of the season, Lando gets the points. Max comes in second. George Russell sneakingly comes up and gets third place for that Mercedes, making up the rest of the podium, which was pretty awesome. Lewis Hamilton, who we were talking about going into it, was going to be strong. I think they just made some strategy calls more than anything. He was running pretty decently. I do believe he's still in the points. He was still top 10, so not all is lost there. Give it a couple of races, get their groove, and we'll see what happens. But overall, good Formula One weekend. Pretty exciting. Wet weather races are always exciting to watch in Formula One. They've got some good strategies, and they're not afraid to run in the rain and whatnot. So it's awesome to see. All right, moving over to NASCAR in Las Vegas. So we had the EcoSave 200 at the Truck Series. We'll cover it real quick. Stage 1 right at the end. Rain comes into play while Ty Majeski is in the lead. A lot of rain races this week. Springtime, I guess. It is what it is. Yellow flag conditions give him the stage win easy way because he was out at the right time. So Ty Majeski was stage 1 points. Stage 2 right at the start ended up with a continuation of a rain delay. They thought they were going to make it work, but they didn't, making things fully dark for the remainder of the race, which racing under the lights of trucks is always exciting. Everything else was delayed for rain for another hour. And then stage 2 ends up going to Tyler Ankrum, who had a great car. He also led laps in stage 1. So he clearly had a fast truck, but they made some issues. We'll talk about that here in a second. But unfortunately, we didn't get to see a real finish till the weather moved in again, red flagged the race. They were far enough in Corey Heim was leading when the race was called, so he gets the second win of the season. Good start for Corey Heim in that group. And then post-race was kind of interesting listening to the interviews. Tyler Ankrum was very frustrated with his truck and his team. He's very vocal about it, probably regrets some of the stuff he said, but we've got it right here for you, so let's take a listen.
Super fast truck, just we screwed up in the engineering department. We showed up to the racetrack with a completely set of wrong speeds and lights and numbers, and nothing right was on the dash. So that was why we were so terrible on pit road, and that was why we lost 8 positions on pit road, and that was why we ended up where we were. So it sucks. We had the truck to win. I took a wrecked truck, took it to the top 10 again. So yeah, no, it's embarrassing, man. You know, you can't expect to show up and win these races when you show up like that. So we're going to move on to wherever we go next, Homestead, and hopefully we're better because at this point in time, I don't know. It's every other race.
Moving over to the Xfinity race, we had stage 1 win going to Justin Allgaier, Little Gator. He was lapping the rear of the field as the stage came to an end, just completely destroying everybody. Stage 2, Almirola gets the stage win there. Allgaier right there, though, tries to take the outside lane, get more stage points, but he still got some. Moving into the final stage, win goes to the strong guy again from stage 1 and stage 2, Justin Allgaier. Little Gator hit a fast car all day, held off the field with over a second and a half lead through the stage. Amarillo tried. There was a bunch of different strategy calls, but overall, nobody could beat Allgaier and the JRM team. So congrats to them on that one. Moving over to the Cup Series, stage 1 goes to Austin Cindric. This is the first stage win for him this season. Stage 2 goes to Mr. Kyle Larson. Had a dominating drive, multiple restarts, just kept it alive and got that stage win. His second stage win of the season, I believe. A lot of points going to the man there. Last stage was a few more restarts. Awesome show from the Wood Brothers, though, in that number 21. Josh Berry. Finally, after all this time, Josh gets his recognition. His first Cup Series win. Wood Brothers get an amazing win, which is great to see. There's been a lot of talk on the internet about it being a Penske car and blah, 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 blah. Listen, Josh Berry came from the asphalt late model groups. Not a lot of guys come out that way. Most guys these days are coming off of dirt tracks. But this guy was a bank teller like 10 years ago, just living his life. You know, he's 34 years old, getting his first Cup win. Like, that's pretty old considering how young these guys start. You know, you got the Connor Ziliches who've already won a handful of races at age 18. Just awesome to see. That Wood Brothers team deserves it, whether they're a Penske affiliate or not, however you want to look at it. The Wood Brothers are still a family-oriented team, and Josh Berry really making things happen and representing everything that Dale Earnhardt Jr. saw in him back in the day when he first hired him on. So congrats to them and that team. That was an awesome race, awesome finish. I like seeing that Josh Berry doesn't burn the car down either. He respects the car. He works on the car. He didn't burn it down. He just parked it on the start-finish line, congratulated his team, and celebrated. So congrats to them. And, we'll look forward to what's going to happen next week here at Homestead. And moving from there, we got IMSA, 12 hours of Sebring. Going to the green, it looked like Tom Blomqvist was ready to just gap the field in the GTP class. He took off. Felipe Nasr and Penske weren't letting Blomqvist get away very easily. 12-hour race, so there's a million things we can cover. There's a lot of action, a lot of cars going off track. Surprisingly, though, most cars going off track were on their own accord. They, didn't have any help and whatnot. But here's our list of winners from the 12 hours of Sebring. GTD class, you had Windward Racing score a win for their number 57 Mercedes AMG. GTD Pro, AO Racing, they had Rexy and the Little Green Porsche get the win in their class. LMP2 for the first time as a standalone team. Inter-Europol got their first win. Every time they've had a podium or win previous, it was with a partner, so it was good to see them get their own win. GTP class, once again, now we're 36 hours straight of wins. Felipe Nasr and Porsche Penske Motorsport, they get the win just as they did in Daytona. They're unstoppable in GTP class, honestly. Pretty awesome to see that, but yeah, dominating performance there, so congrats to all those groups. All right, let's talk some dirt track. We had High Limit Sprint Series in Vegas. A lot of familiar NASCAR faces were supposed to be in this one. Everybody's in town for the NASCAR race. And just so everybody knows, listening to the podcast, and you might have seen some stuff online, but there is a big thing with High Limit now joining as a sister program kind of affiliate with NASCAR. Not so much in the competition side of things, but, you know, at certain tracks, certain weekends, right? Like, so Texas weekend for NASCAR will also be Texas weekend for High Limit and a few others down the road. Thanks to the guys on the Teardown podcast for kind of breaking that down, how they were going to do it. They're also associated with them. So pretty cool to see this lateral movement around motorsports, right? Everything's good for motorsport. So pretty cool to see. But a lot of familiar NASCAR faces. You had Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, Ty Gibbs, who was making his 410 sprint debut and qualified for the A main in his very first time, which was awesome to see. Now, he's had a string of bad luck, and he didn't have any better luck going into the final race, but he did qualify quite well, which was great to see. We had more weather. Once again, Truck Series race got delayed, right? So same thing. High Limit race got delayed. Thursday's race turned into Friday's race. Friday's race turned into a 25K take-it-all finisher, and everything was ran on Saturday. So 3 days worth of racing all into one. So let's talk the final of Saturday night's race. Very early on, we saw Ty Gibbs take a huge tumble on the cushion. I believe this was around lap 2. This was his inaugural 410 sprints, and it didn't go very well for him, like we talked about. So unfortunately, he's safe. He was good. He got out on his own, but it was a rough tumble. So other than that, moving around, about 5 laps to go. A lot of cars running out of fuel in a weird fashion. Really shook up the field a little bit. Pittman had a great lead on everybody before running out of fuel. They ended up red flagging the race and letting everyone fuel up. You had Corey Day and Kyle Larson. Corey Day's kind of been under Larson's wing as far as the NASCAR stuff goes, but on the dirt, they're one and the same. 2 out front for the final laps. Although Larson was trying hard, different lines, he couldn't close the distance, and Corey Day takes home that $25,000. So congrats to him. And he also was trying to run Truck Series, and I think he's set for an Xfinity race, or maybe it's just Truck. But Kyle Larson's always helping him out, so it's pretty awesome. This brings us over to the World of Outlaws Cowtown Classic, Kennedale Speedway, night 1, Friday night. Giovanni Chelsea, a.k.a. the Hot Sauce, dominated most of the race and gets his first win of the season. First of many, I'm sure. He's on a roll already, looking really good. He did not win in night 2, but he was up front. So going into the final night of the Cowtown Classic, the old Buddy Kofoid, he got a good lead and holds off the field. And let's just listen to what both of them had to say about it. We'll listen to Hot Sauce talk about Friday night's win, and then we'll listen to Kofoid talk about Saturday.
Yeah, I feel like the outside lane was better in 1 and 2 than it was in 3 and 4. The bottom of 4 was so black and had so much grip. It was kind of no man's land to get out of it. But I thought I heard someone at one point down the backstretch, but man, lap cars were just, I didn't know if I should risk it and try to get around him and get hung out or just follow him. So glad it went there from 5 laps on to the end. So just proud of my guys. Adam's worked extremely hard. It's been, I feel like a lot of swings here. We've only raced 8 or 9 times and, went from dirt car to being fast at Bike Week and then being fast at Magnolia and making a mistake there and got one back in the heat race. So like I said, just super proud of Blake and Harley and getting, I think, both their first Outlaw wins. So very, very cool.
Rolling into today, even I feel like yesterday, even though the track was vastly different, with seeing how heavy it was probably going to be, I told Dylan, I think to be good, you're going to have to be able to move around and be able to run lines that are kind of goofy. I was running Big Diamond in 1 and 2, or could run through the middle through the holes, and was just really good anywhere. And that's just a testament to Dylan, Nate, and John. They've been doing a really good job all year. We've just been off a little bit and just kept working hard at it, and we just want it really bad where we weren't going to let it get to us. And obviously it was a long, grueling year, and so it's nice to get a win somewhat early on and change some things for this to happen today.
And all right, let's get started on some news, cover a few topics today with what's going on. So I just want to kick this one off. We're just going to go straight into the NASCAR one on this one with Suarez and Catherine Legge drama, opinions on that. So those who don't know, basically there was an unfortunate incident in Phoenix a couple weeks ago with Suarez and Legge. Leg being a lap car and Suarez trying to make a pass. They got together. There's also a little air involved in the situation. It wasn't necessarily just driver mistakes. There's a lot on both ends of this, right? So ended up ruining both of their days. I've kind of kept quiet on this whole opinion thing, but the amount of comments and everything online are pretty wild. So just want to cover the outsider perspective on it. So post-race, this is what was said by Suarez. Says, nothing against her, completely how I am. I hope girls can get into the sport. I hope. The problem is there's nothing wrong with her. What is wrong is NASCAR, Suarez said. So they cannot allow somebody with no experience to run the Cup Series, plain and simple, plain and simple. So not only is this a statement, I feel like with Suarez, this isn't coming from a guy who's got a ton of accreditation to his name, right? This isn't coming from a Hendrick driver, a JGR driver. Yes, Trackhouse has had good moments. Suarez did get a win last year, got into playoffs, but how far did he make it in the playoffs? He was out first round because the only reason he was there falls into a lot of, unfortunately, like the Harrison Burton Wood Brothers situation is he got lucky at a drafting track. So then he wants to run his about how he hopes girls are in the sport, but NASCAR did this wrong because Leg doesn't have any experience, blah, blah, blah. Well, Leg's got more experience than Suarez will probably ever have. Yes, it's not in NASCAR, but it's in literally every other single form of motorsport. And that's the problem with some of the mentality in the NASCAR side of things is they can't see outside the box, right? Like they'll praise Connor Zilisch for being an amazing driver. You know why he's an amazing driver? Because he came from somewhere else. He came from somewhere else doing other stuff. He learned the craft and went with it, and is now 18-year-old development driver. Probably going to take Suarez's seat next year, to be honest. I mean, it just is what it is. And I know Suarez has got a lot of pressure on him and stuff. Making shitty comments to the media is probably not the best way to save your career. So maybe he should shut the and drive a race car and drive it well if he wants to keep his job. Those cars have speed a lot of the time. He makes a lot of bonehead moves. He makes a lot of mistakes. So him getting into it with someone who was in their first Cup Series start on a 1.5 mile track, mind you, not a super speedway, where you can go 6 wide on half the track. There's plenty of room. Was the racing line blocked for the way he wanted it? Probably. Was Leg in the wrong from where she was running the line? Probably. But needless to say, the shitty and everything, there's no reason for any of it, right? Like, I promise you, Suarez could not go jump in the open wheel stuff that Leg runs at 235 miles an hour without having issues, right? Like Leg's qualifying last year, doing flat out 234 miles an hour, takes it all the way up, gets loose, slides up into the wall, and doesn't ever take her foot out of it because she's closing out on her fast lap. It's to make the show at the Indy 500. There's not a chance for it. Suarez would have destroyed a car. That chassis wouldn't have been left. Again, it's different, and it's a different caliber of driving, different experience levels and whatnot. But nobody's taking jabs at him every week for his poor performance, other than saying, hey, if he wants to renew his contract, like he should probably do better. This, and this. But at the end of the day, no one's really saying much more than that because he's had success in some stuff, and he did really well in other. He did really well in the NASCAR South America stuff and everything else, and he's not a bad driver. He wouldn't be there. He puts out these comments, and we'll just fast forward. I know I'm getting on a rant here, but he put out these comments moving forward a week later, a week after the incident, and he's got all of this blowback from his comments. He says, I give her a lot of credit for reaching out a couple of times, and it's good. My position didn't change. I was mad at the situation, and I believe that she got set for failure, which we've all agreed that she got set up for failure, right? Like, there's no question about that. She's not like she was in top quality equipment. Phoenix is not the greatest track anyway. A lot of people just dive bomb in there to try to make stuff happen, whatever the case may be. So we all agree on that. And then he goes on to say, it doesn't matter if you're a great driver or a bad driver. Regardless of that, if you're thrown into one of the most difficult series in the world to be competitive, it's just not fair. That's the way I saw it. I was more disappointed in NASCAR than her, and I mentioned that to her. So clearly backtracking on his initial statements. I'm sure he got a lot of blowback, so he's gonna, have a lot of stuff going on there. But just the soapbox that some of these drivers get on is mind blowing. Like, you probably have the coolest career out there. I know you're stressed out because you don't know that you're going to get replaced, whatever. The performance hasn't been there. I mean, this track record's not stellar. You know, you're mid to back of the pack most of the time. Get off the soapbox. Like, just get off of it. Run your car, and, you know, God bless you. Hope for the best results. But the fact that you can try to criticize someone's skill because NASCAR's competitive because every car is tuned the exact same. The aero is, you know, super close. It's regulated incredibly hard. The inspection process is so tight on these cars. Like, everybody's running. Of course it's competitive because you're all running the same shit. Like, it better be competitive. But that goes to say something too. You can talk about it being the most competitive sport. Well, you're in the back of the pack most of the time, so you must be the worst driver in the competitive sport. Like, just think about that, you know? So, again, nothing against Suarez personally. He's had some good luck with some stuff. I know he does well on a lot of things. I believe he could go to some other form of racing and probably do well also. And yes, NASCAR is competitive, but just racing incidents happen. So shut the fuck up. All right, now that I'm done with that soapbox, my own soapbox after I said don't stand on one, let's move over to IndyCar. IndyCar news, Grand Prix of Arlington. The date is set for March 13th through 15th. That weekend in 2026, we'll see the new street course outside the Dallas Cowboys complex, that Jerry Jones complex, all that stuff. So we'll see that one going. I might try to go to that one. We'll see what it looks like. But I'm a big fan of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. That whole vibe they've got there, and then having a street course race, you know, inaugural one. I don't know if I can miss that one, so might see some of y'all out there. The only other piece of news we've got IndyCar here is Toby Sowery has been named as a reserve and development driver for Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing. Interesting once again to see this is kind of a Prema move for RLL to bring that European thought process to their lineup, but everybody's kind of doing it. You got, going back to the Connor Zilic comments earlier on him being a great driver, you know, he's a Red Bull development driver. He's going to end up in Trackhouse. He's going to probably then end up somewhere further than that. You know, he's on contract with JRM. So this is a similar deal, right? Like, we're seeing a lot of crossover and a lot of things like that going from there. So that's about it for the news portion this week. Had to get that rant out of there. I hadn't talked about the situation with Suarez and Leg, but as someone who's followed Leg's career, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense why you would try to make those comments and whatnot, just kind of defending. And it sounds like they hashed it out and they're fine, but still, you know, don't make dumb comments when you're not a top form driver. So. And let's talk some history. This is going to be a pretty decent little history lesson on something that's kind of fun to talk about. Let's talk about some racing engines. The Miller Offenhauser racing engine, also known as the Offie, overhead cam monoblock 4-stroke internal combustion engine, developed by Fred Offenhauser and Harry Miller. Originally, it was a marine engine, 1930s. 4-cylinder, 151 cubic inches, also 2.47 liters. Miller started installing these engines in race cars, and doing so, they could really wrap these things out, set a new international land speed record of 144.895 miles per hour. For our friends across the pond, that's 233 kilometers an hour. Miller developed this engine into a twin overhead cam 4-cylinder setup at 220 cubic inches, making it 3.6 liters for the full-on racing design. So there were a lot of variations of the design of the Offenhauser racing engine. They were used in midgets and sprints in the 1960s, and you could either run them as carbureted setups, or Hilborn made a fuel injection setup for it after they gained popularity. Both Miller and the company that he sold much of the equipment and rights to went bankrupt in 1933. This is where Offenhauser comes into. He opened up a shop a block away, bought the rights to the engines, bought the milling equipment, the tooling, drawings at the bankruptcy auction, got everything in the auction, right? And he and other former employees from Miller took over the production. That's where he picked up draftsman Leo Goosen, who further developed the Miller engines into the Offenhauser versions. So you see a transition in the 30s from the Miller marine engines going into the Offenhauser race car setup engines. But Miller obviously still getting a lot of credit because it was his initial design. 1946, the name Offenhauser and engine designs were sold to Louis Meyer and Dale Drake. It was under the Meyer and Drake team that the engine dominated at the Indianapolis 500 and all over the midget racing with the carbureted versions all over the United States. It was in 1965 that Meyer was bought out by Drake. They sold the shop and everything to Stuart Van Dyne, designed, refined the engines until the race days with the Drake family. One of the keys to the Offenhauser engine success was just the overall power and compression. They got a lot of that out of compression being alcohol injected or carbureted, naturally aspirated, carbureted setup. So the 251 cubic inches 4-cylinder Offie had a 15:1 compression ratio and a 108 millimeter by 111 millimeter bore and stroke which could produce about 420 crank horsepower at 6,600 RPMs. Those who don't want to make the math, that's 1.7 horsepower per cubic inch, making it incredibly power dense for the weight and size of the motor. Anytime you can get over 1 horsepower per cubic inch, you're doing well. There were some variants of the motors that would wrap a little bit higher out and you get 3 horsepower per cubic inch. The size and capacity in these power to weight ratio and power to cubic inch and cylinder counts were just insane. Another reason the engine had such great success was its reliability. It was monoblock construction, so it didn't ever have head gasket or cylinder head stud problems. You had no lifting on the heads, allowed for higher cylinder pressures, and obviously that compression ratio is part of that. So let's talk about some of the stats on this thing. 1934 to the 1970s, Offenhauser engine dominated the open wheel racing circuits all over the United States, responsible for winning the Indianapolis 500 27 times. From 1950 through 1960, Offenhauser cars won the Indianapolis 500 and achieved all 3 podium positions for 10 straight years. So winning the pole position 10 of 11 years in a row. So it's wild that kind of success in that decade, like nobody could touch what they were doing, which is just incredible. Offenhauser began to do machine work for Lockheed and some government contracts in 1940 as the war efforts and all that anticipation grew stronger and stronger. The last pre-war engine was shipped on July 17, 1941, and they took a break from that point on, making hydraulic systems after the Pearl Harbor attack. They really jumped in to the war efforts there. In 1959, Lime Rock Park held the Formula Libre race, and Roger Ward showed up with an Offie-powered midget and was blowing exotic sports cars out of the water on that road course, which was new because everybody thought it was just a good, wide open oval track type of engine, but it proved it could go up and down, shifted, everything else. Roger Ward obviously being a great driver as well. Due to the strength of the performance there, that same setup was entered into the U.S. Grand Prix at Sebring for the Formula One event in 1959, and it was not competitive at all. It was about 43 seconds off the pace for the qualifying lap, and started in the very back of the field as the slowest qualifier. So that was unfortunate after having such a dominating thing in Lime Rock, but it's a little different world, right? I mean, given some time and some more efforts, it could have easily gone the other way. But Ford came into the scene in 1963, which ended up kind of standardizing the sanctioning rules on engine and everything else. Offie began to lose its domination in Indy cars during that time. It did remain competitive winner on a lot of circuits through the mid-70s, but that was due to the addition of turbochargers and everything else, and the power levels that were a little more levelized and standardized. The more powerful turbocharged version of the engine was used by Offenhauser in 1968, and that was the Bobby Unser win. That engine made 750 horsepower at 9,500 RPMs, displacement of only 168 cubic inches. It's so crazy that that horsepower per cubic inch ratio is insane. Was able to do over 1,000 base horsepower at 44 PSI of boost, or 3.05 bars for our friends across the old metric plane there. The final 2.65 liter 4-cylinder Offie was restricted to 24.6 PSI and produced 770 horsepower, like we talked about, at 9,000 RPM. So there are a lot of variants from the race setup to the trimmed out setup, but the race version that won that was the 168 cubic inch version. The Offie's final victory came at Trenton in 1978. Gordon John Cox Wildcat car. Last time there was an Offie-powered car raced at Pocono was in 1982. Eagle chassis driven by Jim McElrath. And two Offenhauser engines failed to qualify for the Indianapolis 500 in 1983 with the Volstedt chassis. So definitely as time grew and things changed, they started to fall off, but they had a good run. So let's talk about real quick some engine generations and fun facts. Engine generations for the Offenhauser. We talked about several different sizes, could be bored out, sleeved, all kinds of stuff, normal motor stuff, right? Different strokes and variations of camshafts. They had super wide variation of motors. So let's talk about it by generation. The 97 cubic inch 1.59 liter ran in most of the midget series, and then when the AAA and USAC went to a displacement rule, they changed that to 220 cubic inches or 3.6 liters. Indianapolis 500 rules under the AAA was 270 cubic inches or 4.4 liters at the time. So they made one of those. 1930s in the Indianapolis rule set, they had a fuel consumption rule, obviously pre-war efforts and stuff like that. 255 cubic inch at 4.1 liters. Displacement rule again under USAC rules later on, 252 cubic inches, 4.13, not too far off. And then when we went turbocharged, obviously engines became more efficient, they got smaller. We're still living that life today. Displacement rule there moved everything to 168 cubic inches or 2.75 liters. And then that was up to 1968. And after that, 1969 season and on, Indianapolis 500 rules, 159 cubic inches or 2.6 liters. So pretty awesome. A lot of stuff going on there, a lot of changes, a lot of development, engineering. This is all pre-computer stuff, right? So this is all just guys figuring it out, which is super respectable, super cool. So we'll end it off with a couple fun facts. Fun fact number 1, despite the rule changes that reduced Offenhausers to also ran type motors, Johnny Rutherford put the historic engine back into Brickyard Victory Lane in 1976. This marked the 27th win in 41 attempts, which puts us at a 65.9, let's call it 66% win rate for that engine. That's something that we'll never see again in history. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that. We see it now, but they're 100% standardized. When you only have 2 engine manufacturers in IndyCar, it's pretty easy to get a good win rate. But back in the day when you were wide open, you just had to meet a certain standard. I mean, those days are long gone. The competition from that side of it's long gone, but 66% win rate is insane. 1947 and 1964, so 17 straight years, Offenhauser engines powered the winning cars for the Indianapolis 500. We talked about earlier, they had that stretch from 1950 to 1960, but overall it was actually 47 to 64. The 50 to 60, as we talked about, was a podium lockout for every single car. So all 3 podium positions and the pole and the winner, everything from 1950 to 1960. And finally, from 1946 to 1969, Offenhauser engines won 245 Champ Car races. So just absolutely incredible domination, everything else, whatever you want to call it, just super impressive, great engine, something that will probably, we'll never see again with the standards and the hybrids and everything else, but in history, it's got to go down as the #1 engine of all time. So that wraps up the show for us this week. Again, excited. We're back in full race season. We've got Thermal coming up for IndyCar. We've got Homestead Miami for NASCAR. F1's rolling again. We've got racing right now going on. High Limit Series, midweek races, World of Outlaws. I mean, you name it, it's going. So as always, please share, like, follow, subscribe. We're on TikTok now, all the stuff. Instagram, you name it. Twitter, X, however you want to name that. Just all of it. So appreciate it. And yeah, as always, we'll see you next week, and stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at Historic Hot Laps on X and all your other social platforms for the latest updates and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. You can reach out to us directly at historichotlaps@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, questions, comments, opinions, and additional subject matter you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.